Hold me Hello. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Hi, I'm Rebecca Lauren. We are starting our stream. And in order to start the stream and understand what today's stream's about, I need to go over a few things. So, why do we study a topic? What interests us? What initially starts that spark? What is the point? What are the outcomes? What are the reasons to study a specific topic? And this constantly evolves as we grow and as we learn more and as we become more well-rounded individuals, and also as we as we just gain understanding of what it is that we're studying. There's many different reasons for studying, and in the end, the effect of studying is going to be different depending on what your intended outcomes are and what your intended motivations are. But in the end, there are some things that are just inevitable. That's the nature of science. Is that if you have the right information and you collect enough information, there are certain inevitable results. And I want to talk about different motivations for studying and how I personally have my understanding of topics and academia has evolved since I started getting interested in these topics when I was very young. When I was in around, I think it was like stuff started getting my interest in around like 4th grade when I was 10 years old or so. When I was 12 years old, 6th grade, that's when I really started getting interested in topics. Basically, as I transitioned into becoming an adult, that was basically the start. Was 6th grade, when that's when I was introduced to many different topics, such as and started really understanding the human element. And at first, there's a kind of evolution of my understanding of academic topics. Is at first I was fascinated by the topic, it entertained me, it interested me. I didn't understand the deeper implications and the human element. But it was a start and it got me interested, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with being interested in or fascinated by a topic. I think it's a beautiful thing. Definitely, it gets your foot in the door, and some people spend their whole career in that stage, but in the end, the effect is meaningful whether or not their intention is good or not. And so now my understanding of these topics is coming into fruition because of my involvement with my content creation, my writing, my desires to change the world for the better, and also just because of more fascination. And honestly, the reason I thought of this stream was because I was lying awake early in this morning, which is very early right now. It's almost 3 a.m. here, but I've been up since 1 a.m. Lying in bed in the darkness, thinking about content for y'all, and just thinking about what's important to me and what's important for achieving my goals of improving the world and also educating the world and helping the world, form discussions and all that kind of stuff. And so I determined that there's 3 main categories that I feel like feed into each other and are probably the most important topics in academia and in human nature. And that's psychology, philosophy, and history. Now, why these 3? So psychology, in order to understand the other 2, I feel like you are hurting yourself by not understanding human psychology. Because human psychology is the core of why we do things, how we do things, the environmental reasons, the biological reasons, the metaphysical reasons, the nature of why our brains work a certain way and why some people's brains work a different way. I am neurodiverse. Neuroscience is a subcategory of psychology. We're going to be focusing mainly on cognitive psychology today. As far as I have a couple different textbooks, and that are from an open textbook project. I shouldn't get in trouble for these. These are all Creative Commons. Why philosophy? Because philosophy gives us tools to talk about any topic. Philosophy gives us, because we all have, especially me, I have very much lacking in philosophical argumentative tools. And the reason we study philosophy is so that we can develop a codified language, a standard methodation of talking about something that we believe in, or talking about something that it just to gain more information or insight or understanding, and also because it's interesting, and because some people, a lot of people have had a lot to say about this topic, about philosophy, which, like psychology, it bleeds into everything that we will study in academia. It bleeds into everything that we will study as human beings. Even as a Twitch streamer, philosophy will influence your content creation, and psychology, of course, as well. Understanding your community, understanding each other, the people you work with, and all this is amazing stuff. So I feel like these three topics are the most important for content creators. That's my main reason for these three topics. As far as history goes, people say that that adage of, if we don't know history, we're doomed to repeat ourselves, and that's very much true. But it's a very these old, a lot of stuff in academia, and I'm saying, it's the irony of it. A lot of stuff in academia is sweeping statements that are obviously, it's like slogans or hashtags or anything like that. They don't do the intended meaning justice, because obviously you can't like condense an idea completely down into like a hashtag or like one sentence. And that's why a lot of people who go into school or college or any kind of academia or anything like that kind of go about the study of the topic wrong. A lot of people go for, I'm gonna get like just clip notes. I'm just gonna like, how do you condense this topic into a 10-minute video? And it's like, you can't. Like, you literally can't. Like, are you kidding me? Like, our human society has been around for tens of thousands of years. And there's been so many developments, and there's so many different people throughout time with different perspectives, and you can't possibly condense any topic into one sentence or a 10-minute video, and you're not going to learn it all in one sitting. It's going to take a lifetime, and even then, you're only scratching the surface. You're only getting like a percentage of a percentage of a percentage. And so that's why, when we study history, there's two main categories. We're going to be focusing on Western civilization. Eastern civilization is important, but I feel like a lot of the stuff happening today is based on Western civilization and the rise and fall of empires and all that kind of stuff. And the reason that we can't study history in a vacuum, and we need to understand psychology and philosophy, is because history is motivated by people, and people have different psychologies and different philosophies. And so in order to actually understand why history happened the way it does, we need to absolutely understand human psychology. We need to absolutely understand different philosophies, different outlooks on life, because otherwise you're just reading facts. You're reading like, okay, in 1982 this happened or whatever, and obviously it's fascinating. But in order to truly understand history, you need to understand the motivation and the underlying reasons why things happen. And so that's pretty much what today's stream is going to be about. It's going to be pretty much like just a kind of introduction for me and for the stream, and eventually for YouTube if you're watching in the future. Hi, I'm from the past. But why these topics, I pretty much covered that. and also just because I'm fascinated, and it starts conversation. It might be interesting to my viewers, it might not be. Whatever. There's many different reasons. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so without further ado, we're gonna kind of go over an overview of all these things, and just like a main overview, and, kind of like a bullet point. Yeah, the way I approach any kind of topic is I look at the entire overview. Okay, we're gonna start with ancient history. For history. Everything that I'm going to be reading, as far as we have a couple books that we will be reading. They're from we have Introduction to Philosophy and Logic, edited by Benjamin Martin. It's on, let's see, what's the name? It's on the Open Textbook Library, which Open Textbook Library, all content must be openly licensed. We accept textbook license with GNU and Creative Common license, with the exception of the CC Creative Commons non-derivatives component. Creative Commons by is recommended. Go to Creative Commons for more information about selecting a license for your work. Must be a complete textbook, available as a complete portable file, PDF or EPUB. Must be in use at multiple higher education institutions or affiliated with a higher education institution, scholarly society, or professional organization. And must be an original textbook, not a derivative of another textbook. Possible exceptions to this criteria are modifications that reflect the needs or context of an entirely new audience. For example, the textbook has been changed in such a significant way that it is now relevant to a new country, profession, or has been translated into a new language. Authors or publishers will be asked to demonstrate significant changes to the original text. And it's just about open licenses. So for philosophy, I just picked an introduction to philosophy. Those are usually a good start, and you could read a lot of introductions. You could actually spend like years just reading introductions, because the nature of I've read a couple different, I've read, or at least skimmed past, or not skimmed, but I started out reading a couple of different introductions to philosophy. And the thing about Introduction to Philosophy is that every different person is going to have their own different introduction and what should be focused on, and so it's actually really important to understand different people's perspectives. And this is just about logic, and logic's a good deal. Logic is a good thing for chess players. Introduction to Philosophy. Logic provides students with the concepts and skills necessary to identify and evaluate arguments effectively. This is important for me because I personally, I'm very motivated and very emotionally driven, and sometimes that doesn't really translate well to communicating effectively and to arguing effectively. So that's a big deal for me personally. But for anyone really. The chapters, all written by experts in the field, provide an overview of what arguments are, the different types of arguments one can expect to encounter in both philosophy and everyday life, and how to recognize common argumentative mistakes. Okay, and then we have a book called where's the for psychology, and that's where we're starting out today. Where we're going to be reading Mind, Body, World, Foundations of Cognitive Science. I feel like this is a really important part of all three of, it's another three, there's no, it's not unique that we do things in threes. It's a very, it's a triangle. It's like the strongest structure, basic structure in the universe is a triangle. You might correct me on that, but so mind body is important because mind, body, and world is important because obviously we all have a mind, and when we say body, we can talk about body physically, or we can talk about our body metaphysically or physically, or just the idea of a body as in like a unified focused uh, organization or anything like that. And then world, of course, is how we're all connected, even without intending to. We are a part of the universe. We are a part of society. Even when we try to isolate, we are still physically present in the world, which makes us a part of the world. This is just kind of cognitive science arose in the 1950s when it became apparent that a number of disciplines, including psychology, computer science, linguistics, and philosophy, were fragmenting. Perhaps owing to the field's immediate origins in cybernetics, as well as to the foundational assumption that cognition is information processing, cognitive science initially seemed more unified than psychology. However, as a result of differing interpretations of the foundational assumption and dramatically divergent views of the meaning of the term information processing, these separate schools emerged. Classical cognitive science, connectionist cognitive science, and embodied cognitive science. Examples, cases, and research findings taken from the wide range of phenomena studied by cognitive scientists effectively explain and explore the relationship among the three perspectives. Intended to introduce both graduate and senior undergraduate students to the foundations of cognitive science, Mind Body World addresses a number of questions currently being asked by those practicing in the field. What are the core assumptions of the three different schools? What are the relationships between these different set of core assumptions? And so when they say the three schools, they mean what they mentioned earlier, which are classical cognitive science, connectionist cognitive science, and embodied cognitive science. So what are the relationships between these three different sets of core assumptions? Is it only one cognitive science, or are there many different cognitive sciences? Giving the schools equal treatment and displaying a broad and deep understanding of the field, Dawson highlights the fundamental tensions and lines of fragmentation that exist among the schools and provides a refreshing and unifying framework for students of cognitive science. So that's a very interesting thing that I'm looking forward to getting into very shortly. And then we have Western Civilization, A Concise History, Volume 1. And this is going to go throughout all of human history and Western civilization. And it's a completely comprehensive text. And I feel like that's the only kind of text we should, as far as, like, it's funny because with history, an introduction to history is a complete concise history. Like, that's what we call an introduction in history. Like, it's kind of funny. Okay, when we say the idea of Western civilization, and just as an overview, introduction, what is Western civilization? Furthermore, who or what is a part of it? Like all ideas, the concept of Western civilization itself has a history, one that coalesced in college textbooks and curriculums for the first time in the United States in the 1920s. In many ways, the very idea of Western civilization is a loaded one, opposing one form of branch of civilization from others as if they were distinct, even unrelated. Thus, before examining the events of Western civilization's history, it is important to unpack the history of the concept itself. So, that's pretty much what's going on. Whereas the West, Mesopotamia, Greece and Rome, the Middle Ages and Christianity, the Renaissance and European expansion, the modern era, the approach of this book with caveats, and then notes on the second edition, and that's basically what this volume is about. And that's definitely a good place to start. And so if we go through the main wiki books bookshelf, we have history by period, we have ancient history, modern history, African history, Asian history, European history, Middle Eastern history, Oceanic history, Western history, which is what we're focusing on because it's an all-encapsulating thing for Western history. world history, and then arts, religion, history, technology, guide for historians, and miscellaneous. So it's important that in order to understand art and religion, and technology, of course, but mostly arts and religion, we need to understand the history of the region and also the history of of that region's relationship to other regions, which sometimes art is encapsulated in a region that is isolated from a lot of society. For example, Japanese history was isolated for very much of its history, and no doubt there are other societies that were isolated from other regions. But it's important that arts and religion are based entirely on that arts and religion are based entirely on the culture and the region involved at the current time, with the current society and the current the current traditions and all that kind of stuff. So that's why understanding art and religion is not in a vacuum. I mean, yeah, you can approach art and religion from a vacuum, and that has its place, but if you truly want to understand them, you have to understand the big picture. That's pretty much my approach to any academic topic, is I need to understand how the topic applies in a real life way, and that's important to me. And that's not to say that going into complete vacuumism, I don't know if that's a word, going into complete laser focus on a topic, that definitely has its place, because you can use that insight to further expand your bigger picture view. So for cognitive psychology and cognitive neuroscience, it's a huge umbrella within psychology itself, which is even bigger umbrella, but we're starting with cognitive psychology and cognitive neuroscience because we all have brains and we all have, psychology. So cognitive psychology and cognitive neuroscience is a featured book. Okay, so let's see. It's cognitive psychology in the brain. Imagine the following situation: a young man, let's call him Canute, is sitting at his desk, reading some papers which he needs to complete a psychology assignment. In his right hand, he holds a cup of coffee. In my left hand. With his left one, he reaches for a bag of sweets without removing the focus of his eyes from the paper. Suddenly, he stares up to the ceiling of his room and asks himself, what is happening here? It's probably GM Hikaru. Probably everybody has had experiences like the one described above. Even though at the first sight there's nothing exciting happening in this everyday situation, a lot of what is going on here is highly interesting, particularly for researchers and students. In the field of cognitive psychology, researchers and students in the field of cognitive psychology. They are involved in the study of lots of incredibly fascinating processes which we are not aware of in this situation. Roughly speaking, or an analysis of Canute's situation by cognitive psychologists would look like this. Canute has a problem. He really needs to do his assignment. To solve this problem, he has to perform loads of cognition. The light reaching his eyes is transduced into electrical signals. Let's look that word up. It's a transitive verb, to convert. So something such as energy or a message into another form, essentially sense organs transduce physical energy into a nervous signal. To cause genetic material to undergo transduction. Okay. Transduction is the process by which foreign DNA is introduced into a cell by a virus or viral sector. An example is the viral transfer of DNA from one bacterium to another, and hence an example of horizontal gene transfer. So it's basically just transference. Transference is a completely different term, so don't think that. The light reaching his eyes is transduced into electrical signals traveling through several stations to his visual cortex. Meanwhile, complex nets of neurons filter the information flow and compute contrast, color, patterns, positions in space, motion of the objects in Canute's environment. Stains and lines on the screen become words. Words get meaning. The meaning is put into context, analyzed on its relevance for Canute's problem, and finally may be stored in some part of his memory. At the same time, an appetite for sweets is creeping from Canute's hypothalamus, a region of the brain responsible for controlling the needs of an organism. This appetite finally causes Canute to reach out for his sweets. Now, let us take a look into the past. They didn't mention the coffee. Okay, so yeah, we have, a complete, and, to understand a topic, you need to understand the history of cognitive psychology, Renaissance and beyond, 20th century and the cognitive revolution. What is cognitive psychology? Relations to neuroscience, cognitive neuropsychology, neuroanatomy basics and methods. So what is cognitive psychology? The easiest answer to this question is, cognitive psychology is the study of thinking and the processes underlying mental events. Let's read that again. Cognitive psychology is the study of thinking and the processes underlying mental events. Of course, this creates the new problem of what a mental event actually is. There are many possible answers for this. Let us look at Canute again to give you some more examples and make the things clearer. He needs to focus on reading his paper. So all this attention is directed at the words and sentences which he perceives through his visual pathways. Other stimuli and information that enter his cognitive apparatus, maybe some street noise or the fly crawling around along a window, are not that relevant in this moment and are therefore attended much less. Many higher cognitive abilities are also subject to investigation. Canute's situation could be explained as a classical example of problem solving. He needs to get from his current state, an unfinished assignment, to a goal state, a completed assignment, and has certain operators to achieve that goal. Both Canute's short and long-term memory are active. He needs his short-term memory to integrate what he is reading with the information from earlier passages of the paper. His long-term memory helps him remember what he learned in his lectures. He took and what he read in other books, learned in the lectures he took and what he read in other books. And of course, Canute's ability to comprehend language enables him to make sense of the letters printed on the paper and to relate the sentences in a proper way. Now, this is kind of interesting here because I've thought of this many times. And of course, Canute's ability to comprehend language, specifically ability to comprehend language, or basically language, or comprehend language. That's that's the main thing I'm talking about at this moment. So Canute's ability to comprehend language. And so this topic right here, it's an interesting subject because the way we understand the world is intrinsically linked to our native language. And so if you are primarily researching a topic in the English language, for example, that means that you aren't subjecting yourself to ideas intended for native speakers of Spanish language, Mandarin Chinese language, Japanese language, Italian language, Russian language, what have you, Arabic language, etc. So this is the main reason why we have standards of language, why we say English is the standard for academic papers in many situations. But of course, many people have different native tongues, and how can we possibly limit people? Because obviously the pursuit of knowledge should be uninhibited completely, except in question of ethical situations, which can limit your obviously, such topics such as cloning or genetic engineering, because that's manipulating people, which is considered morally wrong. And of course, you have to draw lines in science and technology at some point, which is a tough call in a case-by-case basis. And that doesn't mean that you can't approach a problem that might be morally unethical in an ethical way, for example, you can study genetic engineering but outlaw the practice of it, which is kind of tough. It does limit the knowledge you can gain, because then you can no longer, you would be limited to AI simulations, which, of course, genetic engineering could give us the answer to curing diseases or curing cancer or curing viruses. So it's kind of a interesting thought that we will never have a second native language. We all have one native language, and while some people, there are people who are multilingual, people who are, have second languages, third languages, etc. Even if they're raised with both languages, there still is a primary native language, because there's always one that takes precedence over the other. Even in a small way, there's still, so people who are born and raised around an environment with multiple languages are duolingual or multilingual in a different way as somebody who learned a language later in life. So it's a frustrating problem, and one we can't, at least at the moment, with our understanding of neuroscience and possible genetic engineering or body modification, which might be morally unethical, but I'm not going to discount what can be understood in the future, and what could be considered ethical if we, approach it from the right way so that it becomes ethical. But the thing is that, for the most part, it's basically impossible to have a second native language. So you do have a bias inherently. You have an inherent bias because of your native language. You are really only be able to gain knowledge through sources that are in your native language or translated to your native language, which definitely delivers the information differently than somebody who understands the native language of the source material reading it, compared to somebody who understands the language of the source material as a second learned language. So that is something that we will never be able to really overcome, and one of the reasons why we have to work together and offer different perspectives. Okay, and so we start where the sentence was again. And of course, Knuth's ability to comprehend language enables him to make sense of the letters printed on the paper and to relate the sentences in a proper way. This situation can be considered to reflect mental events like perception, comprehension, and memory storage.
What I made was corn muffin mix, but I made them special. I made them from scratch, So
what the heck?
I had to take it out the box.
Why was that put into the no copyright playlist? I mean, I guess that's no copyright, but cornbread. I love cornbread. I like to call it corn cake because it's really because I'm diabetic, I don't really intake sugar too much. And so it's like, whenever I eat something even remotely sweet, it tastes much more sweet than it might to somebody who ingests sugar on a regular basis. So it's like when I eat something like cornbread, it tastes like cake. And that's kind of an interesting thing. Like, if you don't add sugar to your coffee, if you don't add things to your, if you don't eat sweets, then that means you're able to appreciate things that are remotely sweet as if they were sweet. So it's kind of an interesting thing, because your brain craves sugar the more you eat sugar. And anyway, some scientists think that our emotions cannot be considered separate from cognition, so that hate, love, fear, or joy are also sometimes looked at as part of our individual minds. Cognitive psychologists study questions like, how do we receive information about the outside world? How do we store it and process it? How do we solve problems? How is language represented? Cognitive psychology is a field of psychology that learns that learns and researches about mental processes, including perception, thinking, memory, and judgment. The mainstay of cognitive psychology is the idea where sensation and perception are both different issues. So we need to look up these individual terms. Ah. I thought I did new tab. I have to hold down control, obviously. Okay, so we have memory, here. Perception. It's a noun. The ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through the senses. The state of being or process of becoming aware of something through the senses. The perception of pain, for example. It's a very visceral example. Some people might say this is a bad example. I think it's a very good example because the perception of pain, it's something we can all understand. All of us at some point, that's the first, and one could argue that's the beginning of when we started to grow up. When we were very young children and we first recognized that we can feel pain. And the first time that you store that pain into your memory is the first time you start to grow into an adult. Because your understanding of the world as an adult is definitely different than your understanding of the world as a child. And it is a journey, so it is the start of a journey, but it's still, I think the first time that you store perception of pain into memory is the first time you become an adult. Even though it's still the very early stages, you become a baby adult, for example. Because before that, you are a child in the sense that you feel pain and you don't recognize that that pain is attached to a specific thing. And there are it might take only once, it might take several times, but until that happens, you are still a child. And this is why I argue that we start to become adults the moment we put perception of pain into long-term memory. Because that's when we start to learn the environment around us and to understand the implications of certain things. If we see a fire, we know not to touch it, for example. A way of regarding, understanding, or interpreting something, a mental impression. So Hollywood's perception of the tastes of the American public. So that's an interesting topic in itself. So Hollywood presents, obviously, writers. So they say Hollywood, but they mean writers who are then propped up by Hollywood. Have very specific ideas of what the American public appreciates and understands and has tastes in. Okay, so then we have thinking. Okay, so I'm at the Control Shift tab for these because it's and then memory and then judgment. Okay, so thinking, it's a noun. The process of using one's mind to consider or reason about something. They have done some thinking about welfare reform. So that's another topic in and of itself. Welfare reform, Or as an adjective, thinking is using thought or rational judgment, intelligent. So he seemed to be a thinking man. A thinking man and a thinking person and a thinking human. Okay, so memory is a noun. The faculty by which the mind stores and remembers information. So I have a great memory for faces. That's actually one of the most primal memory functions of the human mind. Is that we develop a memory for our parents. We imprint upon our parents, and our parents don't have to be our biological parents. For example, you could be born and then you're raised by adoptive parents, or in some cases, there have been rare cases. I don't have sources for you. I don't think it's important for this conversation, but take my word for it. There are, and you could Google it. There are cases, very rare, where human beings have been completely isolated from other humans and raised by the wilderness, and maybe their version of faces is completely different than our version of faces, which are typical human beings, which are born into a family unit. And there's people around us who take care of us and all that kind of stuff. We go enter into a society. So it makes sense that if your entire life you've never seen another human face except for a reflection of your own, and your idea in the same mental region that processes human faces was attached to your environment around you, so trees, animals, plants and everything, and the sky, clouds, the sun. Your idea of what the sun is would be completely different based on not having preconceived knowledge of what it is. You would have, there are things that are consistent regardless of whether you have knowledge or not. So you would eventually understand the sun to be, a bringer of light and warmth and all that kind of stuff, because you would notice that it's colder when the sun is invisible and when it's darker. You would have concept of what it means to be light or dark, and you wouldn't know that those are the words for that, but you would know the concept of that. You would create your own language, and if you're completely in isolation, it would not be a spoken language. And so when you finally, and that's why imagining somebody who was born and raised completely alone and isolated from human beings and only communicating with nature, to see another human being with a face that resembles your own reflection would be a terrifying thing. And especially if you want to think about, what if you never even saw your reflection? So then it's like, then you don't even have a concept of what you look like, and then when you see people who look like you wouldn't even know that they look like you. And so if you've never seen a reflection before of yourself, when you do see a reflection of yourself, it would be an alien. It would be an alien thing to you. It would frighten you, because it might hurt you, because it's something you've never seen before. And if you've been raised by the wilderness is constantly trying to kill you. So it's a very real and valid fear response. Something remembered from the past, a recollection. And everything I'm talking about regarding everything that I'm replying to, commenting on, is specifically this: something remembered from the past, a recollection. So I have read something or seen a documentary or thought about this topic and connected it between each other. And this is one of my gifts. One of the positive parts of my autistic brain. This is one of my gifts, is I can recall information I've read. I might not be able to call it, and this is why I have trouble citing sources, but I can talk about this. I think it's more important to understand the actual topic than to understand the information surrounding the topic. Like, I don't need to remember who wrote something. I don't need to remember what book it came from. Like, obviously I do if I'm like, oh, wait a minute, like, who wrote that so that you can read it? Like, that's different. But then it's like, that's what Google is for, One of my earliest memories is of sitting on his knee. So it's like, yeah, my earliest memories of my dad. And I do have fond memories of my mom. In fact, my mom taught me how to read. She would highlight newspaper and I would read. And this is when I was like 3 or 4 years old. I was a very gifted child, okay? Like, I learned how to read at 3 or 4, I played Mario Brothers and all that kind of stuff. I was an exceptional child, okay? There was different problems because society expected me not to be a gifted child. And so I was propped up as a gifted child, but I didn't, the thing, and this is where judgment comes in. It's funny that I naturally went to that. Maybe it was subconscious. But that's another topic on its own. Especially with neuroscience and psychology. This is specifically what we're talking about. So the meta-analysis of the meta-analysis. So like, because I often did not conform to my teachers and family and friends' expectation of, because I was a gifted kid, and I still am, obviously. But, because I did not, because I wasn't always consistent as far as behavior goes, they wanted me to they expected me to get good grades. They expected me to always be like doing my homework, and on top of that, I had unrealistic expectations for my specific autistic needs. That because there were so many other things besides just academic topics that were going on in my life, and I was undiagnosed not until I was 31 years old. I'm 33 now, and so it's like I went a whole lifetime of people judging me based on a neurotypical person. And to be fair, our understanding of the autistic brain and just neurodiverse brains in general is really kind of a burgeoning science. It was understood before, but it was never understood there was a huge insurgence in like the 2000s, 2010s and stuff. And judgment is a particularly important topic right now, because that's what's going on with Donald Trump. Is how do we judge somebody who has committed so many crimes against humanity? Judgment is also known as adjudication. I sometimes accidentally call this word abjudication, but it's actually adjudication. So judgment is also known as adjudication, which means the evaluation of evidence to make a decision. Judgment is also the ability to make considered decisions. The term has 4 distinct uses: informal, which are we're not going to go deeper into that. So, the ability to make considered decisions or come to sensible conclusions. So an error of judgment, or a misfortune of calamity viewed as a divine punishment. So that's like, we're talking about divine judgment. The crash had been a judgment on the parents for wickedness. And then, that's kind of like a logical fallacy. It's the Deus Ex Machina, or, no, it's not Deus Ex Machina. It's something. But it's kind of like a cop-out fallacy. Like it's a weak logical fallacy, or it's a weak form of logic to say that something happened because of some kind of divine judgment. Because some things are correlated, but they're not. They're correlated, but they're not. They're not causative. They're not causative. They're not causative. Like, for example, like you could say that there were fires in California, and then you could also say because there was fires in California, that means that God cast judgment on California for having views on abortion and gay marriage and stuff like that. That's terrible. It's a huge logical fallacy, because that's correlation based on your own understanding of what morality is, and also just not taking into account that fires happen whether or not you believe that they were judgment or not. Like, there's so many different problems with the statement that fires happen because of divine judgment. Like, it's a very weak logical argument. Okay, now that we're done meta-analyzing, what is a process? Okay, let's do one more. Okay, what's a process? So a process is, as a noun, or processes, is a series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. So military operations could jeopardize the peace process. That's another very relevant topic right now. Or for law, specifically, a summons or writ requiring a person to appear in court. And we're not studying law, which is a completely different specific topic. Requiring all these 3 topics that I'm exploring, that I'm beginning the exploration process in this stream. We're going to have future streams where we're reading these books, so look out for the nerdy academic streams, if that's what you enjoy. Be on the lookout and go, oh boy, Rebecca's gonna get smart. Okay. Okay, verb. Third person present is processes. Okay, so perform a series of mechanical or chemical operations on something in order to change or preserve it. So the various stages in processing the wool. That's a very specific example. Okay, so let's just start over from the beginning of that paragraph. Cognitive psychology is a field of psychology that learns and researches about mental processes, including perception, thinking, memory, and judgment. The mainstay of cognitive psychology is the idea where sensation and perception are both different issues. And so now we need to look at sensation. So sensation is a physical feeling or perception resulting for something that happens to or comes into contact with the body. So a burning sensation in the middle of the chest. So it's a physical feeling. Or a widespread reaction of interest and excitement. So it could also be a mental feeling. So his arrest for poisoning caused a sensation. Okay. And obviously there's cognitive neuropsychology, there's neuroanatomy basics, and there's methods, like scanning things. So there's multiple things. So we're going to close that tab. So then we have philosophy. There's different philosophies, of course. It's a huge philosophy. There's political philosophy, of course. But the origins of philosophy and what is philosophy. So we have the etymology of philosophy. The term philosophy is derived from the Greek words philos, meaning to love, and sophie, meaning wisdom. Interesting enough, these sound very similar to the word phallic and sapphic, which means phallic meaning masculine and sapphic meaning feminine. So men love and women are wise. So that's an interesting that's an interesting etymology to those words. So in the Phaedo, Socrates says that philosophy is a preparation for the death that awaits us all. That's Socrates' interpretation of what philosophy is. And it's important to make that distinction because you could say that Socrates was the father of philosophy, but or that he started philosophy. But what philosophy always existed in the human mind, but he was the first one that we know of to become an orator, which an orator was somebody who talked to people, and then eventually people like Plato wrote down what he said. And of course there's like an endless game of telephone where somebody says something and then somebody writes down their interpretation of it. So Socrates was the first known, or officially historically known, student of philosophy who put philosophy into concrete terms. He was basically a homeless person who just ranted about stuff. That's literally who he was. He was just if he existed today, he would be like a crazy guy who smokes crack at the bus station. Socrates says that philosophy is a preparation for the death that awaits us all, and so that's his interpretation. His interpretation of philosophy is that we're all coming to terms with our mortality. Just from being born, our clock already started, and so that's our very nature of existence is created by by that process. If we never died, our philosophy and our understanding of the universe in turn would be completely fundamentally different than our philosophy and understanding the universe, by the very nature of the fact that from the very first time we breathe in oxygen, and also from conception. I'm not going to get into the morality of conception and what constitutes a human life. And by the way, because it's a human life does not necessarily mean that it's wrong to abort at a certain time. So, some animals in the wild eat their young. So it's, because they know that they can't survive. So it's in nature. And it's fucked up. It doesn't make it okay, but sometimes you got to make that judgment call, where, that the life, for abortion. I'm only not going to go any deeper on this for now, but like for abortion, for example, sometimes the life of the mother and the life of the family is more important than the life of the fetus. So there's a judgment call. And for example, a very concrete example, if you were in or a hypothetical, it's a very concrete example for a hypothetical example. If there was a fire in a lab and there were 2 rooms and you only, and the fire was raging, and you only had time to go into one of those rooms to save something, and in one of the rooms was a collection of fertilized, let's say we reached a place in science where we could grow humans in tubes. I'm not going to question the morality of that, but I think it's a good thing, because what if you could just grow a human without the need for an incubator? Like you created an external incubator. It's very important because some people won't be able to survive pregnancy, and also people should have the choice whether or not to actually carry a baby, but also have a biological offspring. So that's a very, that's a very touchy subject, and there are ethical concerns, but I do feel like eventually we will find an ethical solution. And that's key, because you should not, I really do think that it is more important to find an ethical solution to something than it is to pursue science at all costs, because there is a very real cost to pursuing something without ethical considerations. It doesn't mean that you're not going to do it. It just means that you have to explore ethical options, and then your understanding of something. And I think it's better, because then you're coming at it from a very a much better and careful angle. So if we are born from the very, I was in the middle of saying that. Okay, so there's a collection of unborn children, like fetuses, that you would consider life. And not just fertilized eggs, but it's like there's also like actual like 8-month pregnant, like 8-month-old fetuses, or like basically almost ready to be born. Okay, and you have the option of saving everybody, all the samples that are in that room that have not, all the samples in that room, which obviously you would want to save, or this is what's called an ethical dilemma. And obviously the choice should be obvious once I tell you what the second room is. The second room is a room full of the scientists who have families, who have a life of their own. And it's not, even if it was one life, it would still be more important to me, but it's a large group of people who are locked in, and they need your help. And they're going to die if you save the other room, which is unborn fetuses. And I guarantee you could say this in isolation and vacuum, academically, that you would say, oh, well, I would save the unborn lives because there's more of them, and because, the future life, the greater good outweighs the, it's like, but in reality, you would save the fucking living human beings. That's what would happen. Unless you're just like a monster. Because these people are living and breathing, are already alive. And these other people aren't even people yet. They're just unborn fetuses. And obviously you would love to save them, because obviously you don't want to lose unborn fetuses. But if the choice was between living, breathing humans and unborn fetuses that have not even experienced life yet, have not even formed opinions yet, have not, it would be, that would be like if you had a choice of when you had to die, and you knew that you would die, obviously that's something you wouldn't decide until, you wouldn't be able to make that decision until you actually know what it means to be alive. So, there is a more, it is fucked up. It's not a good thing. But at the same time, if the choice is between a living, breathing human being who's already alive and who has family and people love them and they can contribute to society directly right now, and if you want to look at it from a cold logical standpoint, or you save a room of potential life, the choice every single time is going to be with the people who are already alive, and it deep down. And so if you argue that life begins at conception, you're just, life begins, but there are different levels of life. And, not to say that, if you had a moral dilemma of if you had to save a room full of like convicts or criminals, or like people like Donald Trump, or you had to save a room of people who are like, doctors and scientists and whatever. There, it's obviously the emotional choice is to save the doctors and scientists, but there also is a logical choice, because emotionally, you might want to, this was in Dark Knight, in Batman, Joker in Dark Knight did the same thing. Obviously, this is a choice you literally can't make. Like, it's going to be based on, the moment. If it really happened, you would most likely go with the scientists and the doctors, because and if you wanted to look at it cold and logically, the greater good would outweigh it, because scientists and doctors would save more lives than convicts and actual criminals and Donald Trump. And it sucks. You would like to save life, because I don't think Donald Trump should be murdered. I don't think that just because he's a terrible person. I think that he should face justice. He should face his crimes against humanity. But I don't think that he should just be murdered for no reason. But at the same time, it's like, if the choice is between a bunch of criminals and, people who are like rapists and drug dealers and all that kind of stuff, and the other alternative was scientists and doctors, and like teachers and all these people, then the clear choice is the people who benefit society, because that's a cold logical decision, because you're just like, well, they will do better for society than other people. And that's just, it's sad, because we would like people to be able to change. We would like people to be able to, like I said, it's just like the previous example. Like, you hate the decision, but you do have to make a decision. And this is obviously a moral dilemma, but in real life, nothing exists in a vacuum. Anyway, so in the Phaedo, Socrates says the philosophy is a preparation for the death that awaits us all. And like I said, our understanding of the world and our understanding of psychology would be completely fundamentally different if we never died. Because it would just completely change the way we, because we know we're not going to die, all of our decisions are going to be based on that. Okay. Sorry, I had like peanut butter stuck in my throat. And it's estrogen time. Yeah, I'm taking a little bit of a breather. Sometimes you gotta take a little bit of a break from what you're reading. So yeah, this is my thoughts on what I'm doing right now. A very interesting prospect of studying these topics. And I think we're doing a good job, getting ourselves prepared for the reading. Sorry, I just need to like dissolve it and yeah. Okay, and it's a good break, a mental break. Must drink water to lubricate. Okay, so when the mind is engaged in philosophy, it is free of concerns and dwells in the domain of ideas. Our minds enter a spiritual region transcending the death of the corporeal experience. Another, better known view of Socrates is that of philosophy as the love of wisdom. This love discovers truth, and we become wise by practical application in our daily lives of what has been discovered. These definitions highlight the nature of philosophical inquiry. Philosophers ask questions. These questions try to understand the metaphysical and physical universe, including humans in their world. So that's that's basically like what we're going to be going over today. And so as far as history goes, we're just going to go through everything as we're not really going to go through history. Probably not going to go through history today. And this is a very long-term project for me and for the stream. I really do think that I can learn a lot through this studying these three topics, and also through that I can learn a lot through these topics, and also through I really feel like I can contribute to society as a whole by creating content that explores these concepts and offers my view and my analysis and my understanding of these topics. So without further ado, we're going to get to the book that I mentioned that we would start with, which is The Cognitive Sciences. It's called Mind, Body, World. And so we're going to start, and who is this book written for? That's actually kind of a good start. The preface. Well, obviously a preface is usually like what a is what the author kind of wants you to know before you read it. So understanding cognitive science was an attempt to present a particular thread. Mars tri-level hypothesis. I'm not going to tell you I'm not going to read out cited sources information. That's how academic material is written. That's for deeper research. Was an attempt to present a particular thread, Mars tri-level hypothesis, as a unifying theme for cognitive science. At that time, the 1990s, the primary text available for survey courses in cognitive science were surveys of research in the many different content areas of cognitive science. A typical text would consist of chapters reflecting different research areas. e.g., concepts and categorization, mental imagery, deductive reasoning. And of course, like, we could dive deeper into these concepts. So concepts and categorization, mental imagery, and deductive reasoning. And we can, there's an easy way to like create like bookmarks. To like create like annotations. Let me look. No, I'm just gonna screenshot it. That's probably for the best. Well, first of all, I'm gonna highlight it, and then I'm gonna screenshot it. Okay. Concepts and categorization, mental imagery, and deductive reasoning. Okay, and let me screenshot. Okay, and that's saved in my screenshots. Okay. Each chapter written by a different specialist. Such texts provided a solid technical introduction to cognitive science and clearly indicated its interdisciplinary nature. Over the years, I have used several of these texts in my own courses. However, these works did not successfully provide a big picture view of the discipline. Remember I mentioned that earlier? Why was it so interdisciplinary? How was it possible for researchers from different disciplines to communicate with one another? In my opinion, more recent introductions to cognitive science have done little to remedy this situation. Some continue to present a variety of chapters, each written by specialists in different fields. A variation of this approach is to produce encyclopedic or overviews of the discipline with many short articles on specific ideas, each written by a different expert. Others organize the presentation in terms of diverse proposals about the nature of cognitive information processing. This latter approach implies that the breadth of cognitive science leads to its inevitable fragmentation, in a fashion analogous to what has happened in psychology. One accomplishment that has eluded cognitive science is a unified theory that explains the full range of psychological phenomena. In the way that evolutionary and genetic theory unify biological phenomena, and relativity and quantum theory unify physical phenomena. So I'm going to screenshot that. The purpose of the current book is to continue the search for unification. I'm highlighting too much. Continue the search for unification in cognitive science that was begun with understanding cognitive science. This search for unification is made more difficult by the advent of embodied cognitive science, a school of thought that may also be composed of fragmentary trends. Is that seriously? I don't think that's Ben Shapiro, is it? Hi, United. You know, not to say, even, I don't think it's Ben Shapiro, but it might be. Who knows? But even saying that, like, just because Ben Shapiro is a pretty shitty person who has shitty takes and has really bigoted beliefs, it's still possible for him to offer you know, advancements to society if he chose to, you know, utilize, you know, because we can utilize terrible people's ideas, but the fact that, you know, he uses his ideas for spreading hatred and problematic beliefs, and you know, that's different. But I don't think that's Ben Shapiro. I think it's just, I don't know. Anyway, because of this challenge, unification, oh yeah, thanks for the happy birthday wishes, United. Yeah. Thank you. Because of this challenge, unification is pursued in the current work in a more informed and constrained manner than in understanding cognitive science. Sorry, just had to finish off my coffee. Yeah, we're going academic. You missed the introduction. I did like a 2-hour long introduction to before I even started this book. Or like an hour. No, it was an hour. It was like an hour long introduction to. Okay, so the 3 topics that are in the title: psychology, philosophy, and history, and why these topics. I went over that for like an hour, and we went through Wikipedia articles and stuff like that. I read basic overviews and introductions to what the topics were to kind of set the stage. This is all obviously going to be in the VOD, and it's going to be on YouTube later. So it's all whatever it is. But yeah, we're getting really academic. This is important to me, not only as a streamer. I mean, obviously understanding psychology and philosophy, and also understanding history. I'm just fascinated by these topics to begin with. Multiple they're all umbrellas for subcategories. So it's like, there's so many different schools of thought within these main categories. But so right now I'm focusing specifically on cognitive psychology for psychology, and then for philosophy, just logic, and then for history, just basically concise history of the Western world since 8000 BC up to 2007. Or no, wait, no, it's up to like it's a several volume concise history. We're just gonna go complete concise history, like 8000 BC. That's where we're starting, because and they're all 3 of them are connected. So human psychology and philosophy is directly correlated to history, and in order to understand history, we need to have a foundation of the other 2. So basically, welcome to my house. Welcome to Rebecca at her core. Okay, I am a nerd. Okay, I am an academic. Okay, like I would like to learn more about Western history too, especially World War I, II, and Cold War. Yeah, exactly, because that basically World War I, II, and our Cold War, which is basically still going on today, is the foundation of modern history, and it's the reason why we are where we are today. But understanding ancient history as well is, understanding why modern history repeated itself, and stuff like that, and also how it's different, and also how we can move forward. So it's important to understand history, because otherwise we're doomed to repeat it, right? So because of this challenge, unification is pursued in the current work in a more informed and constrained manner than in understanding cognitive science. Emphasis is placed on introducing the key ideas that serve as the foundations for each school of thought in cognitive science. An attempt is made to consider whether differences amongst these key ideas can be used to inform conceptions of the cognitive architecture. History often rhymes. Yeah, history is rap. The hypothesis that I consider in the current book is that the notion of architecture in cognitive science is currently pre-paradigmatic. So paradigm is like we have like a specific paradigm where we understand. In fact, let me just open up that in Google for you. Paradigmatic. Serving as a typical example of something. His biography is paradigmatic of the experiences of this generation, or or denoting the relationship between a set of linguistic items that form mutually exclusive choices, in particular syntactic rules. So paradigmatic analysis is the analysis of paradigms embedded in the text rather than of the surface structure of the text, which is termed syntagmatic, like syntax. Syntagmatic. I don't know if you pronounce it that way. Analysis. Paradigmatic. And how do you pronounce paradigmatic?
Paradigmatic.
Paradigmatic. Okay. Not paradigmatic, because paradigm is a different word. Okay, we're gonna have to look up paradigm. So syntagmatic analysis. Paradigmatic analysis often uses commutation tests, i.e. analysis by substituting words of the same type or class to calibrate shifts in connotation. So syntagmatic is an adjective, so of or denoting the relationship between two or more linguistic units used sequentially to make well-formed structures. So syntagmatic analysis, in semiotics, a syntagmatic analysis,
Syntagmatic.
yeah, syntagmatic, okay. So in semiotics, syntagmatic analysis is analysis of syntax or surface structure as opposed to paradigms. This is often achieved using commutation texts. So syntagmatic means that one element selects the other element either to precede it or to follow it. So, there's obviously you have to really dive into things in order to understand them. So paradigm, a typical example or pattern of something, i.e. a model. So there is a new paradigm for public art in this country. So if you look at a paradigm of a Twitch streamer, for example, is somebody playing a random game and raging or doing silly things. Like a paradigm of an XQC stream. Like a typical example. And specifically in the field of linguistics, is a set of linguistic items that form mutually exclusive choices in particular syntactic roles. So English determiners form a paradigm. We can say a book or his book, but not a his book. In the English language. So, and then we're gonna dive even deeper, because people often don't understand what mutually exclusive means. So we're gonna search for that. So mutually exclusive is a statistical term describing two or more events that cannot happen simultaneously. It is commonly used to describe a situation where the occurrence of one outcome supersedes the other, and supersedes means it goes above, it's above, so it happens before it. So, or no, it's precedes, so it's supersedes. Now we need to look up supersedes. Jeez. Supersede is a verb. Take the place of. Okay, so it knocks it out and replaces it. Okay, so it's different than precedes, which is before, or secede. What? Proceed. Take the place of a person or thing previously in authority or used. So supplant. The older models have now been superseded. So it's you have a new, better example. So mutual exclusivity. In logic and probability theory, two events are mutually exclusive or disjoint if they cannot both occur at the same time. So it's either you're, there is the theoretical, Schrodinger's cat, which is it's both alive and dead. But basically, you cannot, by fundamental definition, be both living and dead. You have to either be dead or you're living. And we're just gonna ignore Schrodinger's cat, because Schrodinger's cat is less about literal definition of life or death. It's more about the fact that you can understand something, and sometimes it can be both answers in different contexts. But sometimes there are fundamental things that are true, and obviously science is the pursuit of that truth, and obviously your understanding of that truth will be refined and can sometimes be overturned. So that's why you can never discount something, and also never have dogmatic views on something, because if you always say, if you say the sun will always shine during the day, well, that's not 100% true, because there may be a time where the sun dies in our lifetime. It could happen where it's some event might happen in the universe that doesn't result in a supernova that kills our sun in a way that life can still sustain itself. So, I mean, obviously that's extremely improbable. It's not based on our understanding of astrological phenomena, but of course we can't discount it, that it could happen. There could be some kind of event. What if there is some kind of like, what do they call them? Third tier, like third or fourth tier society. Like we're considered a first tier society. There's a second tier. I don't know if that's what is it. First tier society. Or no, first tier. We're living in a two-tier society. Oh wait, no, that's the wrong word. First stage evolution. No, first stage. What is it? Oh, yeah, first type civilization. There we go. So a first type, okay, so it's called the Kardashev scale. So a type 1 civilization, also called a planetary civilization, can use and store all of the energy available on its planet. So we're not even a type 1 civilization, by the way, because we're not even able to utilize all of the energy available on our planet yet. So a type 2 civilization, also called a stellar civilization, can use and control energy at the scale of its planetary system. And we're gonna go back into. So we're gonna dive deeper into this for now. This is kind of fascinating. So we're gonna look at the Kardashev scale. So a type 1 civilization, also called a planetary civilization, can use and store all of the energy available on its planet. Type 2 civilization, also called a stellar civilization, can use and control energy at the scale of its planetary system. And a type 3 civilization, also called a galactic civilization, can control energy at the scale of an entire host galaxy. And so if we go into this, like, current status is like, we have not yet reached type 1. And, so like star lifting is a process where all advanced civilization could remove a substantial portion of its star's matter in a controlled manner so potential problems of a type 2 civilization that could arise would be if we go beyond our control of harnessing energy from the sun, and we drained all the sun's power, and we stored enough energy so that we could sustain life on our planet without the sun. But in effect, we killed the sun, and and we completely, without destroying, like, hypothetically, if you were to say that we harnessed all the sun's energy, but in doing so, we completely blacked out its light, so we took all of its energy without destroying its mass, because in order to keep our planetary system alive, we would need to maintain the gravitational pull. Because all life in the solar system is based on the gravitational pull of the sun. So if we got rid of the sun, it would destroy life in the solar system. It would completely destroy life in this solar system. So if we were able to, and also there are ethical concerns that if we completely harnessed all the power of the star without reducing its mass, life other than human civilization. If there was any life in the solar system outside of human life and outside of Earth life, it would potentially be destroyed, and most likely destroyed. Except for Jupiter, which seems to be a very isolated place, it does rely on gravitational pull of the sun as well. So it's like there are like ethical concerns, which is if we become a Type 2 civilization, how would we be able to utilize the power of our star without destroying life? Without disrupting the balance of the solar system life balance. So, there are proposed models of harnessing the sun's power, such as like there's a Dyson sphere or Dyson swarm, and similar constructs are hypothetical megastructures originally described by Freeman Dyson as a system of orbiting solar-powered satellites meant to enclose the star completely and capture most or all of its energy output. So with the thing with solar energy is you're collecting its output without stealing its production. So you're taking like free energy. It's not free, of course, but like, you know, there are ethical dilemmas like with that, because if you take energy that is no longer being, you know, with cosmic radiation is no longer emanating throughout the galaxy, or throughout the solar system in the galaxy, because all energy, even though it does diminish as it travels, you know, it diminishes. Cosmic radiation might be a fundamental aspect of the universe. And the absence of cosmic radiation might disrupt life in the universe as we know it. So if we start tampering with our sun, it might have a direct impact that we could never foresee on the entire universe. We could destroy the universe as we know it, or at least disrupt the balance of the universe in our local area. So that's something to consider for the environmental environmental protection is going to expand as we become a type 2 civilization. We need to start thinking about our environment in our solar system and in our surrounding solar systems. So if we were to harness all the energy of our sun, but then by doing so got rid of its output that might be contributing to life outside of our solar system, or even within our solar system, because we do not understand antimatter, we do not understand like dark matter or whatever. We do not understand the nature of the universe, and so if we started collecting things that limited or got rid of the output of cosmic radiation or solar radiation, then that might, like I said, that might disrupt life as in the universe. So that's something that, that's a problem for a type 2 civilization to consider. Because it's just the same as if we harness like fossil fuels or fracking or anything like that. Like, it has a direct impact on our planet, or crude oil or anything like that. Like, utilizing energy that the planet produces creates problems that impact the planet, and such as pollution and all that kind of stuff. So environmental concerns are not limited to our planet. Like, we'll have environmental concerns that relate to the entire universe as we know it. So Type 2 civilization is going to have a very real problem with this, because how can we possibly know what our impact on the universe will be in order to expand our own civilization? And obviously at some point you just have to make an educated guess and just face the consequences if and when they occur. So at some point our human civilization, whatever it evolves to by the time if and when it becomes a type 2 civilization, would have to confront that problem and find an ethical and reasonable way to pursue the advancement of science. So type 3 civilization might use the same techniques employed by a type 2 civilization, but applied to all possible stars of one or more galaxies individually. They may also be able to tap into the energy released from the supermassive black holes, which are believed to exist at the center of most galaxies. White holes, if they exist, theoretically could provide large amounts of energy from collecting the matter propelling outwards. Capturing the energy of gamma ray bursts is another theoretically possible power source for a higher advanced civilization. So gamma ray bursts might be the most abundant source of energy in our universe. In gamma ray astronomy, gamma ray bursts are extremely energetic explosions that have been observed in distant galaxies. They are the brightest and most energetic electromagnetic events known to occur in the universe. Bursts can last from 10 milliseconds to several hours. And in the nature of the universe, there's basically no difference between a millisecond and a billion years. Like if you really want to think about relativity, the universe, if we were to go off the assumption that the universe has no consciousness, then time has no meaning. So a millisecond, or an attosecond even, what is an attosecond, by the way? The actual definition. An attosecond, which is 1 times 10 to the negative 18th of a second, so 1 quintillionth of a second. For context, an attosecond is to a second what a second is to about 31.71 billion years. The word attosecond is formed by the prefix atto and the unit second. Atto was derived from the Danish word for 18. So basically, There is no such thing as I mean, there literally is like a beginning and an end, but technically those don't exist, because as soon as something starts a process, as soon as a process has started, we have started a process of infinitely proceeding forward. And there may be an identical universe that infinitely proceeds backwards. We don't know. And, you know, obviously you could theorize whatever you want. In whatever definition you call of your movement of time, it is always forward, because you are constantly observing something and moving through something. Now, it's impossible for us to understand, because by our definition we are moving forward. But if we were observing our own existence from the opposite point of view, we would be seen as moving backwards. So it really doesn't matter, I don't think. So what is the smallest units of measuring time? Theoretical smallest increment of time. So Planck time is the time light takes to travel 1 Planck length. Theoretically, this is the smallest time measurement that will ever be possible. So, so Planck time. So in particle physics and physical cosmology, Planck units are a set of units of measurement defined exclusively in terms of 4 universally physical constants, in such a manner that these physical constants take on the numerical value of 1 when expressed in terms of these units. So you say 1 unit, a single whole unit, which you can, expand or compact infinitely. But you need to have a theoretically smallest and a theoretically biggest, but there is no such thing, really, because there can always be something smaller. So in mathematics, you have to define it as a theoretical smallest, because otherwise you can't work with it. Originally proposed in 1899 by German physicist Max Planck, these units are a system of natural units because the origin of these definition comes only from properties of nature and not from any human construct. Okay, we're not going to dive into this, but that is something to think about. This whole thing is based on paradigm, so we're going to exit all that. Okay, so let's get back to the reading. Okay. Let's start from where we got that from. The hypothesis that I consider in the current book is that the notion of architecture in cognitive science is currently paradigmatic. One possibility to consider is that the notion can be made paradigmatic by considering a theory of architecture that pays heed to the core ideas of each of the cognitive sciences. We're going to screenshot that. I do not presume to describe or to propose a unified cognitive science. However, I do believe that the search for such a science is fundamental, and this search is the thread that runs through the current book. So I need to screenshot this because this is the fundamental core assumption and core belief of the author. Who's the book written for? This book is written with a particular audience in mind, the students that I see on a day-to-day basis in my classes. And obviously, whatever the author intends to be the audience, we are a student of academia, we are a student of philosophy. Just being a human alone is becoming a student of the universe. So I really don't think that anything exists in a vacuum, and I really do think that anything that we could possibly study in the universe has real-life applications, because otherwise, we exist in the universe. And just because it might not seem relevant to you, it may not be. You get to pick and choose what your life has meaning. Like we pick and choose our meaning and how we create meaning. So, but I really do believe that any subject that we can possibly study within our universe will have a direct real life impact, because otherwise it wouldn't exist. That's obviously an assumption, but such students are often senior undergraduates who have already been exposed to one of the core disciplines related to cognitive science. Others are graduate students with a deeper exposure to one of these disciplines. Our one goal of writing this book is to provide a set of ideas to such students that will help elaborate their understanding of their core discipline and show its relationship to cognitive science. Another is to provide a solid introduction to the foundational ideas of the cognitive sciences. So let me screenshot that. Did I screenshot the whole thing? Okay. I will admit from the outset that this book is much more about the ideas in cognitive science than it is about the experimental methodologies, the extant data, or the key facts in the field. This is not to say, by the way, extant, that's a word we need to look up. So extant.
Extant.
Extant is an adjective, especially of a document, still in existence, surviving. The original manuscript is no longer extant, and I'm going to show that on stream. And I'm going to print screen. Okay. Still in existence, surviving. The original manuscript is no longer extant. So it's like you can, and another word is, especially in programming, we say, well, there's a movie called Extant as well, so it seems. But there, what's the term? There's a term in programming. It is made. What's the term? Not legacy code. Deprecation, that's what it is. Deprecation. Several fields, deprecation is the discouragement of, so it's not that it's outdated, it's that it's not advised to use it anymore. It might be worth expanding upon, but in the current terminology, feature, design, or practice, may be worth exploring, but it's recommended not to use at the time that it's considered deprecated. It may no longer be considered deprecated later, so it's different than, I guess it's different than something that's like completely been outdated, or legacy. Typically because it has been superseded or is no longer considered efficient or safe, without completely removing it or prohibiting its use. So it's different than that. So it's different than becoming outdated or prohibited. Typically, deprecated materials are not completely removed to ensure legacy compatibility or backup practice in case new methods are not functional in an odd scenario. Yeah. It can also imply that a feature, design, or practice will be removed or discontinued entirely in the future. So certain things like Adobe Flash or something like that are considered deprecated and will eventually be removed. I'm pretty sure Flash was already removed, but it's, I mean, not removed, but deprecated, and so it's considered improper to use Adobe Flash now. And you just to use like HTML5 or JavaScript or anything else. Okay, so I will admit from the outset. I will admit from the outset that this book is much more about the ideas in cognitive science than about the experimental methodologies, the extant data, or the key facts in the field. This is not to say that these topics are unimportant. My perspective is simply that sometimes an emphasis on the empirical results from different content areas of cognitive science at times obscures the bigger picture. In my opinion, such results might indicate quite clearly what cognitive science is about, but do not reveal much about what cognitive science is. It depends on what your definition of is. Fortunately, the student of cognitive science has the option of examining a growing array of introductory texts to compensate for the kinds of omissions that the approach taken in the current book necessitates. So we're going to skip acknowledgements. I guess basically just all these different things. Then we're going to go just skip over cognitive sciences. One or many? So we have a chapter overview here. Hi, Evil T. Yeah, we're just going over academic readings in psychology and eventually philosophy and history. Right now, we're pretty much doing an overview today on today's stream. And right now, we're focusing on a book on cognitive psychology. Okay. Chapter overview. When experimental psychology arose in the 19th century, it was unified discipline. However, as the experimental method began to be applied to a larger and larger range of psychological phenomena, this new discipline fragmented, causing what became known in the 1920s as the crisis in psychology, a crisis that has persisted to the present day. Okay, so I'm gonna screenshot that. It's a very key point in this chapter. Okay, cognitive science arose in the 1950s when it became apparent that a number of different disciplines, including psychology, computer science, linguistics, and philosophy, were fragmenting. Okay, screenshot that. Some researchers responded to this situation by viewing cognition as a form of information processing. In the 1950s, the only plausible notion of information processing was the kind that was performed by a recent invention, the digital computer. This singular notion of information processing permitted cognitive science to emerge as a highly unified discipline. So this is really important because we live in the computer age, and it's becoming more and more apparent that there needs to be significant changes to our understandings of cognitive science, of cognitive psychology, in order to eventually face ethical dilemmas, and moral dilemmas, resulting on the advancement of artificial intelligence. So that's a very real thing that is actually it's a very real thing that is a very realistic outcome even in our lifetime. So, and we might not even be that far off. We might be very far off. It might not happen for hundreds of years. It might happen tomorrow. It might happen right now, like literally at this millisecond. So a half-century of research in cognitive science, though, has been informed by alternative conceptions of both information processing and cognition. As a result, the possibility has emerged that cognitive science itself is fragmenting. The purpose of this first chapter is to note the existence of three main approaches within the discipline. So, classical cognitive science, connectionist cognitive science, and embodied cognitive science. So I'm definitely going to because this is like the purpose of the chapter entirely. So we're gonna save that. Okay. What are the core assumptions of these different schools of thought? What are the relationships between these different sets of core assumptions? Is there only one cognitive science, or are there many different cognitive sciences? Chapter 1 sets the stage for asking such questions. The remainder of this book explores possible answers to them. So I definitely need to screenshot these questions. It's gonna be a big screenshot, jeez. Okay. So 1.1, a fragmented psychology. Hi, just tuned in. Interesting. For strong AI, my bet is is on embodied if it happens at all. What do you mean by embodied? Let's Google that. Embodied AI. I'm guessing that you mean like androids and gynoids. I guess because terminology changes as language changes. Technically, a female artificial intelligence, mechanical, body representing human anatomy is called a gynoid, but I think we just say android is an all-encompassing term. Embodied AI. What is embodied AI? The study of intelligent systems with a physical or virtual embodiment, so robots and egocentric personal assistants. The embodiment hypothesis is the idea that intelligence emerges in the interaction of an agent with an environment, and as a result of sensory motor activity. So that makes sense. Let's screenshot that. It's from AIhabitat.org. Ben Gortzel, I'm not sure about Ben Gortzel. Let's Google that. Ben Gortzel is the CEO and founder of SingularityNet, a project combining artificial intelligence and blockchain to demonstrate access to artificial intelligence. Did he invent Ethereum? Is that he was the director of research of the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. So no, not Ethereum. And then that's just like, that's just making me curious. History. Ethereum founder Vitalik Buterin. Ethereum was initially described in a white paper by Vitalik Buterin, programmer and co-founder of Bitcoin Magazine, in late 2013 with the goal of building decentralized applications. Okay, so we're not going to dive into that for now. We're going to get back to what we were working on. But that's interesting. So modern experimental psychology is rooted in two seminal publications from the second half of the 19th century. Elements of Psychophysics, originally published in 1860, and Wundt's Principles of Physiological Psychology, originally published in 1873. Of these two authors, so I'm definitely going to have to, because that's bibliographical information. Might want to look into those later. Of these two authors, it is Wundt who is viewed as the founder of psychology, because he established the first experimental psychology laboratory. His Institute of Experimental Psychology in Leipzig in 1879, as well as the first journal devoted to experimental psychology, Philosophical Studies, in 1881. Fechner's and Wundt's use of experimental methods to study psychological phenomena produced a broad, unified science. This general significance of the experimental method is being more and more widely recognized in current psychological investigation, and the definition of experimental psychology has been correspondingly extended beyond its original limits. We now understand by experimental psychology not simply those portions of psychology which are directly accessible to experimentation, but the whole of individual psychology. It's from Wundt, taken from Wundt and Titchener. So we're going to, of course, screenshot that. However, Not long after its birth, modern psychology began to fragment into competing schools of thought. But yeah, that's the main reason why this author wrote this text. This whole text is seeking to unify the fields of modern psychology, specifically relating to cognitive psychology. The Würzburg School of Psychology, founded in 1896 by Oswald Kulpe, a former student of Wundt's, challenged Wundt's views on the scope of psychology. The writings of the functionalist school being established in North America were critical of Wundt's structuralism. Soon, behaviorism arose as a reaction against both structuralism and functionalism. Psychology's fragmentation soon began to be discussed in the literature, starting with Bühler's 1927 Crisis in Psychology, and continuing to the present day. For one prominent critic of psychology's claim to scientific status, psychology is misconceived when seen as a coherent science or as any kind of coherent discipline devoted to the empirical study of human beings. Psychology, in my view, is not a single discipline, but a collection of studies of varied cast, some few of which may qualify as science, whereas most do not. Okay. The fragmentation of psychology is only made more apparent by repeated attempts to find new approaches to unify the field, or by rebuttals against claims of disunity. The breadth of topics being studied by any single psychology department is staggering. Psychology correspondingly uses an incredible diversity of methodologies. It is not surprising that Leahy called psychology a large, sprawling, confusing human undertaking. Because of its diversity, it is likely that psychology is fated to be enormously fragmented, at best existing as a pluralistic discipline. If this is true of psychology, then what can be expected of a more recent discipline, cognitive science? Cognitive science would seem likely to be even more fragmented than psychology, because it involves not only psychology, but also many other disciplines. For instance, the website of the Cognitive Science Society states that the society brings together researchers from many fields that hold a common goal: understanding the nature of the human mind. The Society promotes scientific interchange among researchers in disciplines comprising the field of cognitive science, including artificial intelligence, linguistics, anthropology, psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, and education. So that's from the Cognitive Science Society. And of course, I'm going to screenshot that. These several paragraphs here. And I feel like that last information is somewhat relevant. When cognitive sciences appeared in the late 1950s, it seemed to be far more unified than psychology. Given that cognitive science draws from so many different disciplines, how is this possible? So, we're going to take a quick break because we've read a lot and we overviewed a lot before we started this text. So, I need to take a bit of a mental break here. And also, just I want to drink some milk, and it's not really good to talk too much while drinking milk out. We've been going for 2 hours. It is now almost 5 a.m. Oh, you know what I need to do? I keep forgetting to switch over my my Twitch to run ads only when I call them, and then keep remembering to run them every hour. That's one thing I haven't. That's one thing I haven't really fixed. Okay, I don't think I'm in the right settings. Content. Is it in content? No. Let me Twitch ad settings. Okay, so I have to go into affiliate preferences. It's in the hamburger menu, okay, and then preferences, affiliate. There we go. Oh no, I just have ad-free viewing. Oh, that's for subscribers. Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, I need to not do pre-roll ads. So disable pre-roll ads when I run ads. So 30-second ad break equals 10 minutes pre-roll ad free, up to 30 seconds plus ad break. Up to 1 minute. 30 second plus ad break equals 30 minutes. Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. And I'm gonna roll an ad. Top of the hour, every hour. Oh wait. Now we're gonna wait 15 minutes to do that. Yeah, so yeah, basically I think we're gonna take a bit of a break next time we get back to in about 15 minutes we're gonna get started on reading a concise history, because I feel like if you're going to be working on cognitive psychology and philosophy, it's good to it's good to space out psychology and philosophy, because philosophy is directly related to psychology. It's kind of weird, you know, because sometimes you have to like take like mental breaks, and the only way to really learn is to take breaks. You know, obviously, you know, like I'm a little bit different. I have an autistic brain, so it's like I can literally go for hours and hours and retain information. Like that's one of my superpowers. Okay, it's like obviously it still has the same principles that work for most people. Honestly, I'm not like an alien, okay? Like I'm still a human being. Just because I'm neurodivergent doesn't mean I don't share. I mean, doesn't mean that I'm like fundamentally different from neurotypical people, but it's just on a different scale for me. Like I can go for like an hour without a break, or 2 hours, or 3, like. And realistically, my brain is literally taking like mini breaks, because what happens is I take micro breaks. Sometimes it can last like a few seconds, sometimes it can last like 30 minutes, whatever. so my brain is able to like you know, this is my own understanding of my brain. Obviously people who are like experts in the field of neurodiversity would probably be, you know, if I was like studied, you know, by like psychologists and neuroscientists and all that kind of stuff, you know, like directly studied, like formally, I'm pretty sure they would come with some insights. That's something I would actually really enjoy doing, because I really enjoy understanding what makes Rebecca Rebecca. Okay, like, so, and it would be a huge contribution to science, right? So what do you think about this, Olivia? Tell the stream about what you think about what we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's true. Yeah, she's not really talking, okay? I'm making it up. This is pretend. If you hear Olivia right now, you should be concerned a little bit. Not to say it's a bad thing. I mean, I'm just saying you should be concerned, okay? Like really, okay? Yeah, I don't... So, I'm gonna be ending the stream in probably a few hours. Definitely at like 9 o'clock. So I wanna watch Block Champs. But I don't know, I might actually end the stream right now. I think it's a good time to take a break from what we were studying. You really want, like, your time, you really want to take breaks. So thanks everybody who joined. Thanks Bright Dream, thank Evil T, thank United. This has been definitely been a fun stream and exploring these topics, and look forward to future streams where we explore these amazing, fascinating topics. Okay, so thank you so much. Bye.